Welcome to the 14th episode of the Rain Race podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the 2020 FIA WEC hypercar prototype regulations, and we're going to be recapping the recent racing events from IMSA, IndyCar, Formula One, and the Le Mans test day. I'm Chris Aurelio. This is Rain Race. Let's go. Episode 14 of the Rain Race podcast here, as always, or not so always as of recent, joined by Kyle Cuthbertson.
Sup?
Yeah,
back.
He's finally back.
I woke up from my slumber. I got over my Indy 500 hangover finally. It's all great.
It's funny because the second you're actually available and you're not busy every second, I am. So
yeah, this is fun.
But hopefully we'll be back.
Once I have my computer and stuff, I can do editing and stuff, and we won't be so busy, and these can go up normally. Yeah.
Anyway, so hopefully we'll be returning to the regular Monday episodes the day after Le Mans, which...
Notice he says hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I can't guarantee anything right now.
I'm going to put money on it that we won't put out an episode next Monday, because if we record on Sunday, it's going to be after Le Mans, and I know you and Kevin, you guys are going to be staying up 24 hours, and we're not going to get an episode Sunday night, so might as well just tell them we're going to do mid-week next week.
We'll see. But anyway, returning to the Monday schedule soon enough, okay, because summer's coming. So anyway, news to jump into here. We only have one piece of news. This is going to be a pretty sports car themed episode, so if you're not into that, then you can go check out some of the other episodes. But, it's Le Mans week, so we kind of have to go over some of these things. So the FIA has announced the initial concept for their 2020 prototype class, the top prototype class replacing LMP1, quote-unquote hypercar design concept for the new class. Basically what we're going to be seeing is a GT1-esque back in the late 90s, sort of the 1998 Porsche GT1 and the Mercedes and the Toyota GT1, or TS0, no, it would be the Toyota TS020. Sort of having a little bit of some Roadstar styling cues. So we're going to be seeing a return of those cars, it looks like, for 2020. So last week, only the initial details were released. They're going to be releasing some more details later this week. In fact, by the time this episode goes up, they could have already been announced. They didn't really put a timestamp on it. One of the main things about it is that the goal is for the budget to be 1/4 of what it is right now. And nobody really knows how much LMP1 manufacturers truly spend, at least the hybrid manufacturers. I heard people saying Porsche spent around $200 million a year. I've heard people say 100. It's really kept a very guarded secret, but look for these new prototypes to be around a budget of 25 to 35 million a year.
Sports Car 365 said about 30 million is what a quarter of the budget.
I'd say around that ballpark is where we could expect the budget for these cars to be. Cost capping might be a possibility to keep the costs down in that department. Obviously, the part that killed LMP1 hybrids, apart from Dieselgate and the whole VW scandal, was that the cars are just really getting too expensive. I think Toyota has a budget of around $50 million a year, but again, I'm not positive on that. So it'll be very nice to see the budgets going down a little bit. We should hopefully attract some more new manufacturers.
What series nowadays are cost capped? I feel like cost capping is a thing that comes up a lot in motorsports, but I don't know when does it actually happen? I feel like that is brought up way too much for as often as it.
Well, on a large scale, I don't think that it's done too much on a large scale, but certainly some series, like some GT3 series, cost cap the teams so that they don't go out and spend millions and billions of dollars. But
whenever you talk about like F1, WEC, and even IndyCar, you hear about wanting to cost cap and all these things. But I'm just thinking, like, what series has actually done it so far, besides the smaller tier GT3?
Not sure, because well, also it's really difficult to know how much the teams are spending. So it's a little bit of a difficult thing. Whether or not we're going to see spec hybrid units used in the cars, I'm not sure at the moment. We're going to have to wait until they announce more details later in the week, and hopefully we can report on those next week. Also, another thing I want to point out here is that they will be reducing the impact of the hybrid unit in the car. So right now, Toyota is running an 8 megajoule hybrid unit in the car, which means that their power out of their ECU, out of their ICE, I mix up these terms quite a bit, is limited because they have more of an emphasis on the hybrid system. And for the 2020 cars, they're looking to reduce that to around a maximum of 5 megajoules for the hybrid unit. So more of an emphasis on the actual internal combustion engine rather than the hybrid, which is quite a contrary to the initial future regulations that they announced when Porsche was still in the game, when they said the whole electric lap deal, all those gimmicks. Looks like those are all out the window. They just want to focus on keeping the costs down and focus on more of a little bit of an old school racing format. And the last big thing here to go over is that right now there are 5 manufacturers that have been announced at the roundtable meetings hosted by the FIA and the ACO, which consist of Toyota, Ford, McLaren, Aston Martin, and Ferrari. There's a possibility that there are more who are interested, and I quite frankly wouldn't be surprised to see 2 or 3 more. I know that they said they'd hope for around 5 manufacturers when the new regulations actually come out. So it's nice to see that many manufacturers jumping on the ball already.
It's definitely good to see. I'm surprised to see, McLaren up there, Ferrari looking at it. It's definitely a positive.
Well,
note.
McLaren, I think they have the prime car for it with a McLaren Senna. And
they really do.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest surprise to me are the guys like Toyota. What hypercar concept is Toyota going to bring?
Supra.
I mean, they could do that, but that's compared to like a McLaren Senna or an Aston Martin Valkyrie, whatever. Sorry, I butchered that one, but
just call it a Valkyrie.
Why? Sure. I mean, Ford. I highly doubt they're going to extend the manufacturing on the Ford GTs, and that's again more of a Grand Touring car, not a hypercar. So it'll be really interesting to see what these manufacturers can bring with their styling cues mixed in with this radical sports car prototype concept. Moving on to our next segment right now, which is In Case You Missed It, which is back because Kyle's back. And the last time he was here, he had me do it, and that really didn't go too well. So
yeah, it's actually more interesting to make you do it because you fail.
Yeah, but yeah, you're back in this position because this is quite frankly where you belong because you came up with it. But there are 2 minutes on the clock on this one. Not too much to go over, as with the common theme of this episode. But 2 minutes on the clock. Here you go.
I'm going to take my sweet old time. So Graham Rahal and Rahal Letterman Lanigan extended their contract for 5 years on, and keeping with the theme of Rahal Letterman Lanigan, they are in talks with Lena Gade right now to add her to the team, which would be nice to see her stay in the series. And then just keeping on the track with women, we are keeping like.
All right, drop the leeway, son.
But keeping on with women, we have the Women in Motorsports Commission. They are starting a new initiative to, quote unquote, encourage the participation of women in WEC. That's basically the whole gist. That's all we got on that.
Well, the FIA is on board with that as well. I mean, it makes sense because they kind of like head the committee. But,
yeah, but how are they going to encourage participation of women in WEC?
don't know.
I don't know. Exactly. So then the 919 Evo, they are testing a Nordschleife for a record attempt. Don't know how that went, but we'll see. A cycling injury sidelined Draw Barbosa until Road America. He apparently went over the bars and injured his wrist, and he's going to be out for a couple races, so that sucks. Toro Rosso, they approached McLaren to ask if Lando Norris could replace Brendan Hartley, and McLaren said no. So that failed, but they're looking to replace Brendan Hartley, and that's what matters. Pirelli expects to change the name of their tires in 2019 in F1, which, thank God. So maybe we'll actually have like softs, medium, and hard, and that's all. So maybe we'll see something not as complex and dumb. Zach Brown says that McLaren to IndyCar in 2019 is favorable, and Zach Brown was at Detroit, if you didn't know, and Michael Andretti was at Canada, so they're obviously friends and talking. So that's going to happen. And also, Fernando Alonso seems a lot more interested and into the know of IndyCar lately, so I expect them.
He's running his fingers on Twitter recently with all the GIFs.
Oh, yes. Yeah, this morning when I got on my personal account, the one that's not blocked by Marco Andretti, I saw Fernando putting like a Instagram live stream talking about Marco and his like how he's trying to mimic his workout routine or something. And like, wow.
So taking notice of that.
If I was David Land, I'd be sitting here just sitting here like, oh man, that's confirmed.
I'd be sitting here clicking at the keyboard.
If he's friends with Marco Andretti, then he must be going to IndyCar. It's guaranteed.
Yeah.
Starting with recaps. The first, I'm gonna introduce this segment because the first one is a Le Mans test day, and this is your job.
Oh, is it now? All right. Well, the Le Mans test day was last weekend. Every year it's run on the first weekend of June, pretty much. So, along with getting the cars on track for a quick shakedown, the Le Mans test is used so that the ACO can get a preliminary BOP and EOT reading, and I'm going to explain what those are in a video, hopefully coming this week, because there's a lot of questions surrounding that, so keep an eye on my channel for that stuff. Anyway, kind of unsurprisingly, the number 8 Toyota was the fastest out of the test day in LMP1 with a time of 3:19.066. So down a couple tenths from last year. We'll have to see what type of times they're going to be running in qualifying. I could expect around 3:15, 3:16. Obviously, last year, Kamui Kobayashi pretty much just set that thing up. Although, who knows? I mean, nobody was expecting that 3:14 last year, so we could always see a track record this year as well.
Fernando Alonso gets a track record, I'm calling it.
Oh, God. Sort of surprisingly, though, was that the number 3 Rebellion, under the hands of Matthias Besch, was the second fastest, only 6 tenths off the fastest Toyota, with a time of 3:19.680. And the number 7 Toyota was third, followed by Rebellion, and then the 2 SMP cars. And I saw Jenson Button, obviously the big guy racing for SMP this year.
Which no one really is going to care all that much.
Yeah, he's really running under the bus, which is funny, because if it was just him this year and Alonso wasn't there, he'd probably be the biggest guy on the grid, but he's kind of like a guy
under
everyone's
the bus
forgetting
of Jenson
about.
Button is Juan Pablo Montoya in my eyes, too. I'm actually more excited to see Juan Pablo Montoya in LMP2.
Yeah,
and again, I am more excited for LMP2.
Yeah, well, but Button said that he thinks that they can get more pace out of the car this week, so we'll have to see on that front. Running down the order, Baikalis was the next fastest team in 7th place, followed by Dragon Speed and Manor Racing, rounding it off in the 2 last spots with pretty upsetting times of 3:27 and 3:28, which, if you're not keeping count, is 8 and 9 seconds off the pace. So, yeah, they're going to have to get some work done. Obviously, they weren't running at Spa because of the sponsorship issues, and Dragon Speed with their rebuilt car as well found their way up into 8th, but they're only running 320 or high 326s right now, so they're going to have to find another around 7 seconds of pace to compete with Rebellion, which I really don't see that happening. LMP2, I don't really talk about LMP2 a ton because it doesn't interest me a ton anymore, because
it is really just spec.
Yeah, I mean, the spec engine, and we do have a tire war, so I guess that's something. But LMP2, Dragon Speed was the fastest there, so one of the slowest in LMP1, but the fastest in LMP2 with the number 31 car and a time of 3:27.228. So actually, they're only 3 tenths off their LMP1 car with that time. So that's pretty funny. But Orica's taking the first top 5 spots in the grid if you include the Signatech Alpine livery and livery team in 5th, followed by 6th place, which was the United Autosports Ligier, the 22 car, the one that doesn't have Juan Pablo Montoya. So around the board, LMP2 looked, it looks like LMP2. I'd expect a little bit closer given how similar the cars are, but we'll have to see how that all fans out during race day.
I do think P2 is going to be a really good race. Probably, P2 and GTLM, GT Pro, those are really the classes I'm looking forward to. Unless the hybrids aren't way faster than the privateers, which I'm expecting. If they are way faster, then obviously that's going to be a Toyota show. But I think P2, honestly, you got great drivers. Cars, same engines, but different cars. Basically, a lot of the cars you see in IMSA. I think it's going to be a good race. I'm actually looking more forward to Juan Pablo Montoya. I think he's going to do great. That's actually what I'm excited to see is Montoya at Le Mans.
Yeah, well, back to LMP2, though. Well, I mean, you're already kind of on topic of LMP2. It looks like Orica has the upper hand again, taking the first 5 spots, like I said, and Ligier taking the last 4 spots. No more Riley on the grid this year, so there's just something to keep in mind. But we do have 3 of the 4 LMP2 manufacturers there. I'm not sure. I mean, Ligier looks, in the hands of United Autosport, they look like a promising team. But again, that was kind of like a standalone time with a 3:29.2, and the next fastest Ligier was a 3:31.6. So
I don't know how much the Oreca changed from last year, but I do believe the Ligier, they had some aero upgrades for this year.
The Oreca remains pretty much unchanged, and the Ligier and Dallara are both granted Joker upgrades for this season to sort of close in the gap on the Orecas, which really wasn't that fair to Oreca, but that's kind of how it goes. Anyway, GTE Pro, the
class everybody is going to get mad about at some point or another.
It's already controversial as of today's BOP updates. Porsche was the fastest with a 3:52.5, which puts them a little bit quicker than they were last year. I think last year at the test they were in the 3:53s or maybe even 3:54s. So Porsche 1-2 with the 93 car being the fastest, followed by the 4 Ford GTs and then Porsche again. BMW found themselves in 8th with the 81 car, although the 82 is down in 15th, which is a little bit interesting. And Aston Martin, if you're looking for a team to point fingers at because they're slow, last 2 cars in the order, respectively 5 and 7 seconds off the pace of the 93 Porsche.
I will point fingers at them. At the same time, it is a new car. But remember what Ford did when they had a new car and they were slow?
Yeah, so, I don't know. I don't think it makes sense for them to be that slow. Now, here's a funny fact.
I will point fingers at them.
Here's a fun fact, though. Is the old Aston Martin, the V8 Vantage from last year, is still running in GT, and because the rules for that class are that the cars have to be at least 1 year old, and they can't run the new Aston Vantage for that reason. Anyway, TF Sport got a 3:59.566, and that is faster than the 95 Aston went during the test. So yeah, I could definitely see them playing a little bit of games. They did get quite a substantial BOP break, so we'll have to see what sort of times they're running. Well, I guess this episode's going up after the first free practice session, but it'll be interesting to see what they can do with that pace. Some other interesting things with that class is that all the BOP updates seemed very random. Like you had Ford getting a boost restriction, but they got a weight break, and then you had teams like Corvette and BMW, who weren't even necessarily that fast, both getting weight added to their cars, but Porsche, who was the fastest, didn't even have any modifications made. So it's definitely a little bit interesting to see that.
I'm just looking around at the spotter guide for Le Mans, and I'm just noticing GTE Pro. It's a lot of great drivers in this field. Probably a lot of drivers that you don't think. You got Antonio Giovinazzi, him in a GT car is going to be interesting. Tony Kanaan back in the Ford, your IndyCar stars, Bourdais and Dixon. Sam Bird in the Ferrari. Antonio Felix Acosta, who's also in Formula E, I believe. He's in BMW. Alexander Sims, of course.
You also all the guys who came over from DTM.
Exactly.
So, and it's nice to have BMW back as well. So, like I mentioned in a previous episode, a record 17 cars in that grid. We'll have to see. I
expect it to get bigger, too, over time.
Yeah, we'll have to see how the rest of the week pans out. But
also, those Porsche liveries.
Oh, yes, the Porsche throwback liveries that they have on the
91 and
91, yeah, the WEC cars. Entered. Yeah, they have them on the WEC entered cars. I heard that they planned on doing throwback liveries for the IMSA cars as well, but they arrived pretty late and they never really had the time to do it. So
Oh, man, imagine if we got like a Gulf livery and then
Yeah, but for their 70th anniversary, they seem to be going all out, even with like the pit
the
garages.
It's like a brick wall, and
yeah,
they have a bunch of pictures on the wall.
Very cool. Interesting. Lastly, GTM Dempsey Proton Porsche, the new RSR is.
Yeah, I think Porsche is definitely going to be really hard to beat in that class.
Yeah, they're taking the new Porsche RSR and the Ferrari 48
too.
The 48 is back again. So this just looks like it'll be a Porsche v Ferrari show, which doesn't surprise me. There's only 3 manufacturers in that class: Porsche, Aston, and Ferrari.
And there's only 2 Astons.
Yeah, Aston. They have 2 cars first of all, as opposed to what it would be like 5 or 6 from Porsche, and likewise
they have
Ferrari.
6 Porsches, isn't that great?
Yeah. So, and also Aston's running the oldest car there by far, so I'm not surprised at all to see that. But yeah, I expect a Porsche versus Ferrari show. Dempsey Proton seems pretty strong. Some promising drivers in that class as well. You have guys like Patrick Long, who are previous pro factory
Christina
drivers.
Nielsen.
Yeah, Christina Nielsen, Giancarlo Fisichella. So that pretty much wraps up our recap of the Le Mans test day. There were a couple incidents on track. Most notably, Pastor Maldonado went off, I believe, at Indianapolis.
The F1
corner.
Have the F1 meme accounts
No, they
found that
haven't.
yet?
There's no photo of it out, so that's a good one. And the 95 Aston had contact with one of the SMP LMP1 cars and had heavy damage. Luckily, the driver, Marco Sorensen, was fine, and they were able to return that car, or they rebuilt that car, and it'll be practicing, qualifying, and racing unless something happens in the next day or two on Saturday. Up next was IMSA at Belle Isle. Only 2 classes there, prototype and GTD, because the GTLM teams were at the Le Mans test. Anyway, it was a pretty contactful, if that's a word, race. There was a lot of beating and banging going on between, let's see, we had Wayne Taylor Racing got involved. You had JDC get involved, the 85 car.
I believe the 99 had some damage.
Yeah, wasn't the 6 car got involved as well, the Acura? I believe they got involved in an incident.
Remember early on in the race, the 22 ESM car, I believe it was a 22. Or no, it was a 2 maybe, I don't know. One of the ESM cars, they were taken off. It looked like there was that race. And then, what happened to the car? Didn't like a door come off or something? Oh, no, they had to change steering wheels. Oh,
that's right.
Yeah, that happened. So they had to change steering wheels. And it was a 22, by the way. They had to come in and change steering wheels after they had the big lead. Then the Acuras, they were leading. They looked pretty good. The 31 car hit the Mazda into the wall. The 31 was just wrecking everybody, and they ended up winning. Nothing from race control, which a lot of people were pretty salty at. And the Lexus hit the wall after GTD, going back to GT. The Lexus hit the wall after winning in Mid-Ohio, and then Acuras, they just kind of ended up 1-2, and they led the rest of the race. It was kind of one of those races where you get to like the middle, and then the grid, they kind of just chill. And it just kind of stays that way. So the 31 grabbed the lead like midway, and then it kind of just was that way the whole race. There was that incident where the 6 car was underneath the JDC, and the Wayne Taylor car pinched both of them, and the JDC car went around, and contact, which you would expect from a street circuit, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty ballpark stuff, honestly. A little bit less clean than from previous years, but GTD, just Meyershank Racing, my bad, put in an absolutely dominating performance, particularly the 86 car. Probably
What's funny is the 86 car is not full-time.
Yeah, probably the best drive ever for Catherine Legg in a sports car race, I'd say.
Probably is.
Apart from maybe 2016 with a Delta Wing at Daytona, when they had pace there as well, but just a dominating performance between the 2 Meyershank Acuras. Paul Miller Racing came up in 3rd. It was a pretty standard race in that department. It wasn't even like Mike Shank had a huge pace, and again, Meyershank, it wasn't like they had a huge pace advantage as well when you look at the fastest lap times, so they just really put together a great race. And on to the championship points, since you just mentioned that the number 5 car is in the points lead in prototype, actually tied with the sister car at 144 points, followed by the number 7 at 130 points.
It's GTD, the number 48 Palmilla Racing car is in the points lead. But then I think the most interesting part of GTD, if we see for the rest of the season, is Mike Shank is literally putting together the budget for the 86 car. They are literally putting together the budget for the 86 car race to race. And the car has done every race so far. Of course, these cars are supposed to do the Tequila Patron races. So Daytona Sebring was covered. And they said, Mid-Ohio's our home race. We're going to get that one together. And then Belle Isle were like, oh, hey, we did good at Mid-Ohio. Let's put together Belle Isle. We did good at Mid-Ohio. Let's do Belle Isle. But then Watkins Glen, they're, of course, there, obviously, already because of Tequila Patron. And then you have, let me count up races. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 more races that they have to cover sponsorship-wise. So hopefully they can sell that they are second in the points right now and are looking for a championship and can do the full season, because I think that is interesting. And the 93 was supposed to go full-time, or they are going full-time, and they're 4th.
They have more than 5 races left, bud.
I'm talking about the
non-Tequila
Patron races.
Yeah, the non-Tequila Patron.
Because they already have 2 of the next races done. Like, they had the funding for those races at the beginning of the season, but they have to get Canada, Lime Rock, Road America, VIR, and Laguna Seca together, which it's interesting. And they're down by the points by, what is this, 3 points? 3-point deficit right now, the first place, and they are a quote-unquote part-time team so far. Which, what are the odds Mike Shank tells the 93 car, hey, we need the 86 to go full-time if they cannot get that budget together.
Yeah, how about I let you continue running your mouth, because there were actually 3 IndyCar races to recap, so this might take a little bit of time.
This is going to be fun.
But let's start with Detroit race number 1. I can talk about that one a little bit as well. However, I never saw Detroit race number 2, so
nice.
We'll take that one step at a time.
So the Detroit races, they were not the most interesting I thought they would be. They were like, well, actually, no, they were really good. The second one was really good. The first one is what you'd expect from race 1. You know, everyone's trying to keep their crap clean. I'm going to be clean here. They're trying to keep their equipment clean. They're trying to make it to the next day. A lot that we saw was strategy. Marco Andretti got the pole. That's like, you got to point that out firsthand. That's how we knew the weekend was going to be crazy to start off, when Marco freaking Andretti gets the pole. By half a second, too. Chris, I thought you'd have something to say about this. By half a second, Marco Andretti got the pole.
Well, I thought it was pretty interesting, and then I realized that the qualifying format for that weekend was goofed. So, like...
It's always goofed.
Yeah, well... It is, but especially at Detroit, where they have limited time. And I think they do it at Long Beach as well. But yeah, I mean, I could rant all day about that.
No, just for the doubleheaders. Because the doubleheaders, they have to qualify on both days.
Yeah.
So that's why they do that. But, yeah, Marco Andretti got the pole by half a second. And then we get to the race. And the top 4, four. Marco, Dixon... No, it was the 4. And then Rossi, they were all kind of running away.
Can I just quickly point this out? This is why we should do podcast recaps every week, because then we forget exactly what happened. So
I do. I'm trying to go through the race in my head here.
IMSA at Detroit.
But then we get the first or so stint. We have the top 4 of Dixon, Marco, and Rossi. And then Marco, I do believe Marco was holding him up. I believe he was holding up the top 3. Because then at the end of the stint, Graham Rahal caught up to the top 3 group, and so the 4 of them at that point were all running in a train, and I believe 5th started to catch up too. So I do think Marco's pace in the race wasn't as good as their qualifying, because then after the first stint, Marco got leapfrogged in pit lane and dropped back to like 5th, and I think he finished like 6th. So obviously he didn't have the full-on pace in the race. And then we get to the end of the race, where we get to my demise, my heartbreak, I don't know. Graham Rahal clips the curb, hits the bump the wrong way, does something weird. It definitely looked like a weird accident. And then the car jolts off, has nowhere to save it, and hits the wall. It was definitely a weird incident. It's probably one of the hardest crashes we've probably seen on a temporary street circuit. If you look close up, the tire, the left rear literally folded in and then jocked the car the other way. And then when he tried to save it, obviously there's no room on a street circuit to save it. And of course he hits the wall. They tubbed that car, had to get a brand new chassis and get it ready for the next day overnight. They were out until about 1 a.m. But then the rest of the race is pretty simple. Dixon goes on to win in Dixon fashion. And then the only notable part to that day on day one to look forward to day two is Hunter Ray did a 3-stop strategy when everyone else did a 2. He took 1 extra pit stop than everyone else and still finished, I believe, 4th in that race. So then we knew Hunter Ray had pace. We go into day 2. Day 2.
Well, let me quickly point this out about day 2. This is funny because you mentioned earlier that we knew it was going to be an interesting weekend when Marco got the pole for race 1. And before the race began in race 2, obviously something happened. I don't know if you saw it or not, but the pace car crashed. So that was quite interesting. It was not like it was a brand new Corvette ZR1, the most expensive car GM makes.
Executive vice president of GM.
Yeah. So that was definitely interesting. It wasn't being driven by Oriol Servia like the commentators initially thought. Shout out to Alan Bestwick and the ABC crew. You will be missed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Can I just say first, for both races, ABC did such a terrible job for their final race. Like, first off, the whole weekend, they didn't say a single word about it being their final race. They said maybe like once, like, oh, yeah, this is our final race. They said that, right? And then also, you would think, hey, you probably got like some video together, to commemorate the like 50, 60-some years you guys were covering IndyCar. Not a single thing. And then you think, hey, I mean, maybe at least you'll do some of the post-race, you'll be good. Then again, we did have a 40-minute delay. Then again, they shove the mic in Hunter Ray's face, get the quickest interview they can, and then Alan Bestwick has to rush what he's saying. He literally has to talk a million miles an hour to end the broadcast. It doesn't even get to say like a closer for like ABC on IndyCar. It doesn't like get to close it, and there's no like special moment for ABC and IndyCar. No, they're just gone, done. And we're on to NBA pregame. It was the most saddest thing I think I've ever had. I think when the broadcast ended, I sat there like in shock. Like, really? That's how we end? It's actually fitting we end IndyCar and ABC that way. Just like some BS million miles an hour outro and then NBA pregame. Like, not a single word. It was pretty disgusting to see. But anyways, when we get to the actual race, of course on race 1, I said Hunter Ray did a 3-stop strategy and still finished like 4th. Well, on day 2, the race was not as, like, interesting strategy-wise because Rossi basically took off. It looked like it was going to be Rossi's day. Like, really looked like it was Rossi's day. He was flying, taking off. The rest of the field, they had some pretty interesting battles and some pretty interesting racing. And then at the end of the race, once all the strategy played through, Hunter Ray, with about 15 laps to go, he started becoming into Rossi's mirrors. He was about 10 seconds back. But, of course, the commentators, being the commentators, they didn't think that Hunter Ray had enough at all. They were saying, they were hyping up Rossi. It was like commentators' curse to a max. They were hyping up Rossi and how good he is. And then Hunter Ray, every lap, starts putting down fastest lap of the race, qualifying laps. And he's getting closer and closer. And then with like 7 laps to go, exactly 7 laps to go, on lap 8 to go, he gets behind Rossi. Rossi locks with the brakes, but they keep going. But Hunter Ray was literally right on Rossi's gearbox. He was that much quicker that he went from like 15 seconds back to right on his gearbox. But then 7 laps to go, he's right on Rossi's gearbox again in turn 3. Rossi locks up the brakes, goes into the extra lane outside the track. He goes off, and then he gets back on. He had a tire puncture, ends up finishing 13th. Goes from almost winning the race to finishing 12th. And then Hunter Ray wins. So Rossi goes from almost winning the race and keeping his points lead, may I add, keeps the points lead to finishing 12th, and Hunter Ray wins. And Hunter Ray gets himself back in the championship fight. He's like 4th now. And Rossi is 2nd after Texas. But he went back to like 3rd or 4th after Detroit. So not the championship run we've seen on Rossi. And it was definitely like really cool to see the end of this race after all season long, we've seen Rossi. He was like Superman. No one could touch him. He's been dominant this whole season. Like, got more podiums than anyone else in the series right now. He's been the quickest. He's been making those epic passes everyone keeps talking about. And he's just looked untouchable in the championship favorite. And then we get to the end of the race, and Rossi makes a mistake by himself and finishes 12th. And if you look back, if you lose the championship by like 20-some points, you can look at Detroit race 2 and think, man, he could have been the champion. Anything you got to add, Chris?
No. In typical fashion, you kind of just wrap up IndyCar to the point where I can't even touch on it. And also, like I said earlier, I never got to see race 2 because I was at work, which is also a common trend. Anyway, I think I'm just going to move this one on to Texas. Hey, what do you know? I didn't see the beginning of Texas either.
Very interested to hear your opinions on Texas. Everyone has a different opinion on the Texas race.
We can talk about the style of the racing later on, but why don't you just take the start here? Because at the start, Zach Veach was the man on the move, and it actually looked like it could be a very promising, promising depending on the way you take it, but a very recent style pack racing IndyCar race.
Yeah, as David said in his video that I liked to hear, is Zach Veach really looked like for the first time this season, looked like a guy that could potentially be like a race winner. He's had potential speed this season. Like, he's looked good at a lot of times. But this race at Texas, we got to see the Zach Veach that, we've been expecting and wanting to see lately. So when he gets comfortable enough with the car, where he feels fast enough and he's got a good car under him where he can just go for it and go for the win. He passed like 5 cars going into turn 1 that lap that everyone saw. He was on fire. He went from the back to third in his first stint. And then does what Tony Kanaan did earlier in the race, washes up a little too high coming out of turn 2, clips the wall with the rear end. It didn't even look like he clipped the wall enough to damage the car, but it did. And he finished. He went up a bunch of laps down, and yeah, that was it for Zach Veach's day. But as he said on Twitter, no matter where he finished that day, they knew he was there. He definitely had a good promise for a rookie, and he did finish the race, unlike other rookies like Robert Wickens, who we've been hyping up. We'll get into that, but and then after we get into the race more, into strategy and stuff, the Penske cars had a very bad blistering situation with the tires, which some Penske fans I know might blame Firestone for this, but I don't blame Firestone for this. Penske puts a lot of wear. They're not good at tire wear. We've seen that from Texas in 2017 and other places. I blame their stiff dampers that they use. But they do have really bad tire wear, and the front tires on the Penske cars were blistering to the point where you saw it on TV. People were making jokes about the F1 groove tires that they looked like they had. They just looked really bad for tire wear, and it really screwed up Simon Pagenaud's strategy and Joseph Newgarden's. It really screwed up their strategy, having a pit earlier than others. A bunch of other cars had tire problems, but it wasn't as bad as Penske's. Like, I know Bourdais had issues and Ed Carpenter had issues. They had to pit early, but it really wasn't as bad as Penske's tire issues. Andretti, I believe they had issues early on in the race, but IndyCar, being smart, didn't do any stupid competition cautions. They let the teams figure it out by themselves. And Andretti looked like at the end of the race they didn't have a problem. Ganassi didn't have a problem with the tires. Ray Letterman didn't have a problem with the tires. It really just looked like a Penske issue by the end of the race. And we got some good battles, some 3-4 wide action where people said this was a parade. I thought it was a good race. I thought it was a really good race. It is. I'll talk more about the race because I realize we're going to talk about the style later. But then we get more into the race. Robert Wickens goes for an inside pass on Ed Carpenter. Ed Carpenter fully takes responsibility for the accident. He comes down on Wickens, and they both hit the wall hard, right in the gearbox. Wickens kind of used Carpenter as like a cushion, so Carpenter got 2 blows. Definitely looked like a bad crash. They're both okay, perfectly fine. Ed Carpenter just took responsibility, which another point I'll add to that wreck was my fantasy picks. Ed Carpenter and Robert Wickens were in the same wreck. Zach Veach was also my pick. He hit the wall 10 laps down. Anyways, I had a bad fantasy week.
Could I quickly point something out about Robert Wickens? I think you wanted to touch on this a little bit. I'm not too sure, though. It seems like the common trend as of recent is that he had a lot of hype for him at the beginning of the year when he finished. Well, he was about to get a win at St. Pete, and then his amazing performance at Phoenix. I feel like he's sort of just dropping back into that sort of like traditional. I mean, his performance is still certainly there. I think he has the pace, but
not at all.
See,
no, he's not. No, he's not. No. No, he's not. When he wrecked, he was third, and before he wrecked, he took the lead from Joseph Newgarden and Will Power himself, and he looked like he was going to win the race until pit stops, and he was still sitting second or third, looking like one of the fastest cars. This dude, for his, like a second race in an oval where he says he's not comfortable, passing Penske cars on the outside in turn one. Yeah, I think he's definitely still at that hype level. I think
he still has it in him, but I think that some of the hype from the beginning of the year has certainly died down.
Did I ever tell you that he was literally trained by Michael Schumacher?
Yes.
He had the Mercedes F1 seat for 2013. Yeah. He had the seat. He had the contract for 2013 before Lewis Hamilton decided to move from McLaren. He had the contract. Okay? That's how good this dude is, that he was going to be in the Mercedes F1 car. And think about it. If he did go to F1, he would have been in the 2014 car where Mercedes has been dominant. Okay, this dude could have been an F1 legend. But he got screwed, went to DTM, and now he's in IndyCar, kicking butt. This dude's going to get a win. Maybe at Road America. He's already been to Road America and IndyCar, may I add. One of these road courses coming up, though. Maybe Toronto. How big would that be if Robert Wickens won at Toronto? I think, but Wickens is going to win soon. And then again, the wreck at Texas, too, that was not his fault.
No, it certainly wasn't his fault. That's not what I'm trying to make the point of, but I just feel like some of that hype from the beginning of the year
like rookies on ovals, like Zach Veach washes up, hits the wall a little bit, like, oh, yeah, he's a rookie, But, like, Robert Wickens, his wreck was not his fault. Like, in another rookie situation, that would be his fault. And then another thing on rookies, Zachary Claman-Amello will go to the next wreck. Will Power gets a miscommunication and comes up in Zachary Claman-Amello. Was that Camello's fault? No. Like, rookies, like, was that DeMello's fault? No. Will Power's fault. These rookies, Texas did really good. Zach Veach, we saw the pass he was making, really good. Lots of talent and lots of potential. Robert Wickens passing Penske cars in the outside of turn one, where you don't essentially do that with this kit, and was leading the race. Lots of potential. Zachary Claman-Amello, when he got in his wreck, he was passing 3 cars around the outside, exiting turn 4. I think Claman-Amello after Indianapolis, I think he has a lot of potential. Yeah, rookies in IndyCar, 2018. It's not like anything we've ever seen. Because you look at rookies from years past. You look at Dale Coyne guys. They not as good. Maybe I think this year's rookie class is the best rookies we've seen since Alexander Rossi in 2016. Best rookie class since 2016 is basically what I'm saying. Anyways, but yeah, we got the wreck with Claman-Amello and Will Power, which set up like a 23-lap race to the finish, which, besides Rossi and Pagenaud going at it in the end, it was really kind of like that was anticlimactic, because Scott Dixon, he was hooked up, and he took off, and it was over at that point. So Scott Dixon gets his second win of the season. Remember, he didn't lead a single lap until he won at Detroit this season, and now he won at Detroit. And now he's won at Texas. So he's got 2 wins, and we're going into Road America where he won last year. So just think about, we're going to go on that Scott Dixon season.
And Mid-Ohio coming up as well. So.
Oh, no. Mid-Ohio is going to be won by a Penske car. I guarantee it.
We'll see.
No, because Scott Dixon lately at Mid-Ohio has not been the Scott Dixon at Mid-Ohio.
Yeah, but that was also, you're comparing the Aero Kit era to the...
We've gone to 2 years straight of Penske dominance at Mid-Ohio.
Yeah, but Dixon was the most successful. Dixon was the most successful at Mid-Ohio though during the IRO 5 years when the cars had a lot less downforce, and
because of strategy.
Yeah, well, and that too, because he's Mr. Fuel Guy. But
Scott Dixon didn't win race in Mid-Ohio. Mike Hull did.
Okay, fair point, but
so he could have won the race, and then even in the Aero Kit eras, they won the pole there in 2015. So if Scott Dixon put a race together at Mid-Ohio in 16 or 17. They would have won it. So, if he's Mr. Mid-Ohio, then Scott Dixon can come at me, bro. He's not good at Mid-Ohio. Yeah, Scott Dixon won the race.
You just told one of the most successful IndyCar drivers of all time, the third winningest IndyCar driver of all time. Come at me, bro.
I will tell him to his face.
Scott, if
Scott
you're
Dixon's
listening
a cool
to
guy.
this,
If I told him he wasn't Mr. Mid-Ohio and we talked about this, I feel like that'd be a fun conversation. Like, it'd be fun. Scott Dixon's a cool guy.
Don't oversell yourself.
Someone was telling me about Scott Dixon having no personality. Like, man, Scott Dixon's a cool guy. He's just not as out there as like a Joseph Newgarden is. If you watch anything about Scott Dixon or like documentaries or anything, like watch the Dixon documentary later this year. Scott Dixon is like a low key guy. He's actually cool. He's like a Rossi. He's not like Newgarden where he's everywhere. Anyways, you want to talk about the style of racing, Chris? I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Well, it certainly was a more spread out style of racing, something similar to what we saw in 2015, which, coincidentally, Dixon won that race as well. I'm not going to say I'm a complainer about it. I think that it could, just like Indy, certainly be improved a little bit. I'm not asking for a return of the pack racing. I'm not one of those guys who demands a pack race. And I know drivers like Bourdais were particularly critical about the pack racing style. However, I think that it could be a little bit closer, especially with the leaders. It's very similar in style to Indianapolis this year, where the leader was really able to pull out and sort of just negotiate the race to go their way. But the guys in the back were having close, exciting racing. So what you could do to fix that, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not an engineer. But I think that that's definitely something that IndyCar has to keep in mind for future seasons when they stick to this package.
Yeah, I can agree on certain levels. I do like that we don't have a pack race, but I feel like this package is definitely, we got a lot better racing than we'd see in like an Aero 5 race. I feel like, or even the DW12 before the Aero kits, I feel like we saw a better race than what we saw back then. But at the same time, we didn't see a pack race, which is a positive. Pack racing is exciting, and it's really good. But like Bourdais said, if we keep doing it, we're going to kill somebody at some point. I hate to be a downer, but it's going to happen at some point if we keep doing it. But anyways, I don't know what they could do, because you add more downforce, you end up making it easier, and you end up with a pack race, essentially. But you add less downforce, then you could get more of the same thing that you have. What anyone would say would be, let's make these cars less aero efficient and let's figure out a way to give them more grip. But I don't know how we're going to do it, especially like a race like this where you end up in the day, start in the day and you go into the night where speeds go up and the grip levels go up. I thought it was good. The thing about the new aero kit that I've loved on the ovals is you can tell who's faster than one another. You know, you don't get those jumbo cars, and if you can get in someone's slipstream and pass them, then you pass them. You have to have your car, you have to have the right setup, and you have to have the biggest balls. At Indianapolis, I saw it with my own eyes. You had like the top 10. They were all running with like considerably close to each other, about half a second to a second apart, all evenly. They all looked like they were just sitting there trying to get past the first stint. They were all together, not really making moves, but not wanting to make moves. And then there was a gap from like 10th place to 13th, where it looked like 13th, Danica Patrick, was struggling. She could not figure out her car, obviously, but she couldn't figure out her car, and she dropped 6 spots in the start, and then had like a 5-second gap to the person in front of her, and Matthias Lace behind her, like right behind her, about to pass her, and he did pass her. So you can definitely tell who's struggling with their car and who's faster than one another, which is not something we saw in pack racing. You definitely have to be set up and ready for the race, which is better than what we've seen in the past. I don't know what we could do to fix it, or if we even need to do anything to fix it. Because Indianapolis, remember, wasn't here for the Indianapolis video, so I can, of course, touch more on Indianapolis too. The thing about Indianapolis too is it was a 90-degree race, and if we see like weather, say in like 2013, where there's more grip, maybe we do see a better passing. And I don't, especially when the leader gets out in clean air, I don't know how you stop the leader from gaining too much time. You know, if the leader's that fast, then they should be the leader. We did see, you know, like a pass Robert Wickens made on Joseph Newgarden, where you can pass for the lead. So I think it just depends on who is the fastest car too. Also, when the leader does get in the lap traffic, that also mixes things up. So it's just, it was more of a classic style of Texas race, and I don't think there's really anything we can do to make it better, but I do think for the race that we got, it can get better, and I don't know if there is anything to change with the car, essentially.
And just quickly moving on here to the last recap of the episode. Thank God, because it seems like we've had just a ton of them. F1 at Montreal. This was...
It's going to be quick.
Among the critics, this was among the critics a very boring race. Go figure, I couldn't see the whole thing.
Even the biggest F1 fans in the world were calling it a boring race. That's how you know it was boring.
The most interesting takeaway I can take from this race, and I'm not really going to bother to cover the race itself. I think that F1 this year has proved to be very exciting compared to recent seasons. It's just this was one of those races where they just can't really get a lot of that action in, which surprised me because Canada is usually one of the tracks that does. Just didn't see it this year. But
every race isn't going to be a crazy one, though.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the point I'm trying to get to.
You kind of do expect Canada to be that much better.
Yeah.
Remember 2014? Like, seriously.
Yeah. The most interesting takeaway from this race, though, I found was that Vettel took the win and reclaimed the points lead. 121 points, and Lewis Hamilton has 120. So it's definitely Hamilton versus Vettel for the second year in a row, and looks like it'll stay that way unless we can get some guy like Valtteri Bottas or Daniel Ricciardo up in the mix. Should point out that those two are only separated by 2 points as well, though they're about 35 points back on Hamilton and Vettel. So a little bit interesting for the points race right now. They're approaching the halfway point of the season, so for them to still be this close is quite exciting. Of course, last year, mid-season is when Hamilton started to really start picking his races and pulling a points lead on Vettel, so we'll have to see if Vettel can capitalize on that this year.
Does Ferrari choke again?
We'll see. But do you have any comments to add from the F1 race?
No.
Oh, all right. That's very exciting.
It is about exciting as the race.
Oh, well, okay. So, as I hinted to earlier, this is the week of Le Mans. So, tomorrow, Thursday, we'll be releasing just a quick 10-minute recap of practice and qualifying, talking about who's quick, who's not, who's hot, who's not, all that good stuff. Hopefully, we'll get Kevin Rollins in as well so he can give his 10 cents. And on Monday, again, I can't guarantee it'll be out on Monday, but definitely next week we'll be having a recap episode, pretty much solely recapping Le Mans. We'll have some news in there, but pretty much solely covering Le Mans in the recap, because in terms of what we cover on this podcast, that's pretty much all that's going on, and it happens to be one of the biggest races of the year. And lastly, barring no issues, we should have that special that we promised a long time ago up next week. I'd expect late next week. If you haven't heard the news already, Ricky Taylor. All right, I already said it in the last episode.
It's funny. I saw him on race day in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I saw that he was there with Penske, so I'm not surprised.
If this weekend goes well, too, he could be a Le Mans champion. We could have a Le Mans champion on here,
Yeah.
If this weekend goes well, we'll see.
Be quite interesting to see, but yeah, it'll be great to get his inputs on the race. So keep your eyes posted for that one. Anyway,
in all honesty, it probably is a good thing that it got delayed this long, because we'll get him a week after he raced at Le Mans. That's going to be interesting.
We'll talk about that. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Rain Race Podcast. I appreciate all listening. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/deductiverain.
You can subscribe to Rail Fanatic 15 on YouTube.
Yes,
linked to the card
subscribers. Right. Anyway, just Google Play, Apple Podcasts, the Rain Race Podcast, all that good stuff there. The usual outro goes as planned, as always. That's going to wrap it up. Again, I already said that. It's been a long episode. It's been slightly unnecessarily long, but it'll definitely be longer next week. And we'll see you all then.